All right, Cleveland lost. Oh, pity. Poorly run businesses almost always have two or three things in common. First of all, no attention to detail. That's the Browns. Throw bad money at mistakes. Panic. Not a real culture or accountability. Those are all the Cleveland Browns. So here's Deshaun Watson, who's inactive for 2 years. That's a red flag. So were the 20-plus civil lawsuits. And they give him a fully guaranteed contract. What do you know? He's not the old Deshaun Watson. He's not. He's slower. When he runs, he's not running to throw. He's not running to buy time. He's running to run. Like the really good quarterbacks, Mahomes moves, eyes down the field. Justin Herbert moves, eyes down the field. Cleveland panicked. It's what they do. Baker Mayfield didn't pan out, so let's take a huge swing on a creepy guy with civil suits that hasn't played in 2 seasons. And they're now trapped with an ugly contract, sad injury to Nick Chubb. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if they panicked again and then went and got Jonathan Taylor from the Colts and gave up great draft picks and paid him a fortune. That's what Cleveland's done almost my entire life. Bad organizations. They find themselves in holes, and they grab a shovel and keep on digging. That's what Cleveland does. You know, it's funny about this, too. It's that these bad organizations, they'll have these moments where it's like, we finally got it right. It was a couple years ago. They had cap flexibility, arguably the best edge rusher in football, Myles Garrett, star receiver, OBJ, tremendous offensive line, had Baker Mayfield on a rookie contract, a star running back. Think about that. Great O-line, edge rusher, receiver, back, quarterback in a rookie contract. It was there. They had a new GM who had a good draft. They had a new coach. He won Coach of the Year. And Cleveland screwed it up. That's 2 years later, 3 years later. 3 years later, they cleaned up all that debt, and 3 years later, they're buying lottery tickets to pay down their car. I mean, they just don't have it. They don't know what they're doing. They panic. Bad money at worse money. It's what they do. They cannot get out of their own way. And so it didn't hurt me at all to watch Deshaun Watson last night. Guy didn't play for 2 years, 20 civil suits, and you're like, yeah, let's give him the best contract in football, fully guaranteed. Of course Cleveland did that. Of course they would do that. Isn't it remarkable, too? You can try to help people. They finally get free of it. They finally have a light on the horizon. Oh, there we go. And 2 years later, bad decisions, poor choices, and here's Cleveland. Hard to root for. And really an organization that's hard to root for. Now they want to blame Stefanski. Now they want to blame, it's Minkah Fitzpatrick. Now they want, look in the mirror. All starts at the top. This is not a well-run organization. Ownership down. And I think I think the GM and the coach are actually very smart people. But you can't get out of the way of an impulsive owner, an owner who panics, an owner who gives a fully guaranteed contract to a creepy guy with civil lawsuits who hadn't played in 2 years. What's a GM supposed to do? What's a coach supposed to do? I mean, I'm lucky. I've had good management in my career. If I had crazy management, there's only so much you can do to save a network, right? There's only so much a GM and a coach can do. In Indianapolis, they've had this issue last couple of years. Only so much a GM can do if you have an impulsive owner. But, Cleveland's a bad organization. Pittsburgh's a good organization. They have different issues. I'd much prefer Pittsburgh's situation. Good players, good coach, good culture, over the Cleveland situation. They are buried with that contract. If Kenny Pickett doesn't work, draft another guy next year. You got your defense all figured out. Maybe get an offensive line upgrade somewhere. You got your backs, your tight end, your wide receivers, your defense. Pittsburgh's in a pretty good spot. They're just being overly loyal. Cleveland's in a bad spot, and they've earned every inch of it. So the Steelers, here's the headline, scored 2 defensive touchdowns in a win. That would have been such an awesome headline in the 70s and 80s and maybe the 90s. It isn't an awesome headline today. Loyalty is one of those words that we view almost empirically as positive, always good. Sometimes you have to move off plans. Sometimes you have to move off people. Like Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's holding the franchise back. But loyalty is so integrated into Pittsburgh's DNA. The O-line, 3 years, not gotten better. Run game, 3 years, not gotten better. Quarterback Kenny Pickett's regressed. They're averaging 4.8 yards a play, second worst in the entire league, and they got dudes. George Pickens and Jalen Warren and Pat Freiermuth, the tight end. They got all sorts of talent here. Stop just being loyal to people. Be loyal, to performance. Cleveland isn't a Super Bowl threat, but they're a terrible organization. Pittsburgh's an excellent organization, but they're starting to become paralyzed, so into their brand, so into loyalty. This offense stinks. 9 completions, barely 21 minutes time of possession. Do you know the Steelers? This is embarrassing in 2023. What I'm about to tell you is embarrassing. They are the only NFL team that doesn't have a first down in the entire first quarter. They're averaging under 10 points a game. They're the only offense in the league. It's not talent. Look around the NFL at many of the young quarterbacks struggling. Kenny Pickett, defensive culture, defensive head coach. Zach Wilson, defensive coach. Justin Fields, defensive head coach. Tua when he had Brian Flores. Mac Jones, Belichick. You think it's a coincidence? But the Steelers not only have a defensive head coach and a defensive culture, and it's when they spend their money, right? That's where they spend it. But Tomlin's being ridiculously loyal to Matt Canada. I'm not here to call people out. 3 or 4 years at your job and you're not good. He was not an elite offensive coordinator in college football. I mean, Kenny Pickett wakes up every morning and he's got obstacles, a culture. The money's on the defensive side. The offensive line's not improving. 9 completions. You think it's a coincidence that many of these young quarterbacks are flourishing, that have a coach that's from the offensive side, an offensive sensibility, and these offensive coaches, McVay and Reed, and they can reinvent an offensive line in a single offseason. This is a mess. The Steelers' loyalty to them is like a credit card with no limit. But deep down, they got nothing but bills. They have massive debt. And finally, the friendly Pittsburgh media is finally asking Mike Tomlin real questions.
Mike, you talked about you get the big play early, and get another big play late. Coming off the game that you did, is that an okay recipe for you? Is get a couple big plays and kind of hang on in between?
We're not going to apologize for winning.
In terms of the slow start of Kenny Pickett, it seems like it's starting to be recurrent. They talk about Matt Canada, but I don't think it's all on Coach Canada. I think that the slow start of Kenny has to take its own responsibility.
Question. What's the question?
Question is, are you going to do anything to spur them, or either one of them to kind of maybe up the ante a little bit?
Certainly.
You don't have to apologize for winning, but how about when's the last big playoff win? The world has changed. Got to move off plans and move off people. It's no fun. You'd rather be loyal. That's always the goal, to vet people, hire right, keep them forever. But things change. The game's changed. Kansas City spends no money on defense. Chris Jones, kids. Rams are doing that. Aaron Donald, kids. Keep it cheap on the defensive side. Got to make a change. Loyalty is almost always a great word. Not today in Pittsburgh with their offense.